And it's such an honor and a privilege to be joined to Nico Kleynhans in studio this morning. Nico, one of the most amazing experiences that I had was being taken to the South African banknote company where they print our banknotes. And I must admit that experience will stick with me until the day I die, because it was just so amazing to see, firstly, them burning and destroying old banknotes that were used past their use by date, so to speak, and then also printing brand spanking new ones that were all crisp and whatnot. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that and a whole lot more. Nico, thank you for your time this morning.
Listeners, and also to you here in the studio. I've come to realize that at my age, there was a school textbook called Adventures into History. And when I worked with this particular theme, I realized that my childhood, in fact, has now become history. And as I looked at what has been happening with the banking industry, uh, it is, in fact, the history of South Africa. In the old days, the task of the bank was to provide the country with banknotes and coins, because that was the only way we could pay things. Because every month, everybody would go to the bank and cash your salary, and you would turn it into notes and coins, and then you would go to each of the shops and pay your accounts. So everything was in that particular tender. The problem came when the banks were closed for 2 or 3 days at a time, because then the shops would run out of notes, they would run out of money, and people would run out of money. So there was a special regulation that said the banks could not close for 3 days in a row. So even if it was a long weekend, they had to open, even if it was just for 3 hours. And those 3 hours, the queues were incredibly long, because everybody rushed in to get some more notes, some more coins. But that was how the economy tended to operate. Those were before the days of the computers, and when you went to the bank, you took with you your bank book, and they then wrote in it and rubber stamped that you've made a deposit or you've withdrawn it. And then once every couple of months, that book had to go into the main branch, where they verified that the balance was still accurate. And then computers became available. And the banks then decided that they were, instead of having a paper-driven system to manage how the bank accounts were run, they would now have computers in the branches. So they were not yet available to the tellers, but they were in the branches. And things became a little smoother. And then ATMs were invented. And that was a major change in technology, because now it meant that the banks could have branches in villages, and it would not be so expensive, because there would be no teller, but there would be an ATM. And the United Building Society was the first institution to actually make those ATMs available to the public directly. And I remember how excited I was that I could draw money on a Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Because before, the banks closed at 11, and if you didn't make it by 11, you were going to run out of money for the whole weekend. And now I could go to the Carlton Center in Johannesburg, draw money out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it meant I could go to a movie. And then Nedbank came along, and they introduced special software which now allowed us to use our computer to go online and actually begin to work online on our bank accounts for the first time. So now we could go online. We couldn't do much, but at least we could see how much money we had in our various bank accounts. And then FNB came along, and they paid a fortune to an American person who had locked in the name eBucks, and they wanted to use eBucks. And the only way they could get it was to pay, and I think it was the equivalent of around R1,000,000
What?
that they paid those days to get the rights to eBucks. And of course, they've made more money from that today. It was a bargain. Even at the time, I was wondering whether it was worth it. Now, today, we use banks quite differently because there are branches of banks that don't even exist in reality. In other words, they are entirely offline. They don't have a single branch that you can visit. That is where the technology is going. Discovery was the first bank to realize that they could use loyalty to begin to train us to use different financial behavior, and also they could make some money. And then FNB has now come to the next level, and they are about to introduce a system whereby we will no longer use plastic cards. So in the next year or two, when you get a credit card, it will not be a piece of plastic. It will be put directly onto your mobile phone. When you go and pay for something, you will flash your mobile phone, and the technology will change. It will have a double code system so that even if your phone is stolen, nobody will be able to tap and pay with that particular device. It will reduce fraud and it will make it safer. But it does mean we will, in our lifetimes, get to the point where we will no longer use notes and we will no longer use coins. And when we give pocket money to our kids, it will not be done in the old way. The last stage that will happen, and that will be new as well, is the AI technology will begin to teach us how to work our budgets. It will actually plan our budgets for us so that when you log in, it will say that you still have expenses of around 9,000 that you're going to spend this month based on what you usually do. And you've only got cash of 8,000 left. So you're going to run short in a week's time or in 2 weeks' time. It's going to get that kind of in-depth. You will be able to push a button and it'll tell you how much money you've spent on fuel this month and which categories of expenses are going to become higher and which categories of expenses are getting out of control. So the kind of technology that will be available and the way we engage with our banks will change. The role of the banks will change. I think we're living in really interesting times, and it's going to make financial planning a little easier than it is right now.
Sure.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Nico. It really is amazing how technology has changed. Thank you for highlighting that for us.